Last Night in Soho is directed by Edgar Wright and stars Anya Taylor-Joy, Thomasin McKenzie, Diana Rigg, and Matt Smith, and among others. And in this story, it deals with a girl named Ellie who ends up traveling to London to learn about being a fashion designer. And she's basically having visions of herself in set as a girl that's basically having visions of this girl that's played by Anya Taylor-Joy that's set in this 1960s, and essentially it has it to where it becomes unraveled into a lot of bad certain things that happened as she starts dreaming more as it goes along. But I'll leave it at there because I don't really go into much spoilers. Here's a little backstory. Now, I've actually become a really big avid fan of Edgar Wright ever since I've seen him from his earlier works of when he did Shaun of the Dead, and I also really loved Hot Fuzz. I haven't really seen much of his other directed films, such as Scott Pilgrim and The World's End, but I heard those are good. I just haven't checked them out. But I really enjoyed one of his last ones he did a few years ago called Baby Driver, and I think that the guy just has a whole lot of talent of having a great style and great comedy in a lot of his works, and it got me really interested in what he was going to do of tackling a more serious type of, a more like a darker tone as far as making a straight-on horror film. And the trailers really got me pumped, especially with them going back into the 60s style and having that kind of production design that looked very lavish, and having it set that made me feel like I was going back in time in the James Bond era, which is funny because we have Diana Rigg in this, who played one of the best Bond girls from On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and tragically this was also her last film. May she rest in peace. And so from the production design and also just the concept of Thomasin McKenzie's character having like these dreamlike states of being transported back into the 60s, I thought was pretty unique premise of what they were going to do with. And upon seeing the film, I can say that I thought it was a good film, but I did feel like it could have been a little better in certain aspects of it. But to give our pros out of the way, I would say that the cast in this, I thought, for the most part, were good. Were outstanding. The two biggest standouts were definitely Thomasin McKenzie. I'm not really familiar too much with her work. I know that she's done like a couple of flicks that she was in. Like she was in that one with Ben Foster a few years ago. I forgot the name of it, but I heard that was a good movie. And she was also in earlier this year in that movie Old, which I never reviewed. But I remember, but that was a movie that I felt it was interesting but pretty weird. But that's a whole other topic. But I really thought she was great in this. Like she really had a very likable presence on screen. You really felt for her in a lot of the scenes, and she goes through a lot of the journey through this that I really got engaged with, especially how it really has some like parallels that go along with the dreamlike world that she's in, and then also in the current reality. I thought as her journey goes along, I felt for her character a lot. And the other one that I really enjoyed the most was Anya Taylor-Joy, and I thought that she was very remarkable. She had a lot of great upbeat personality that I really enjoyed in this, and she tackles into some stuff that gets pretty dark and intense that I haven't really seen her like play before in a film, and I've really come to really like her in a lot of films, especially in movies like The Witch when she first started out in, and Split, and other things like that. And I've really enjoyed her as an actress, and she really gives a whole lot to shine here in her performance in this. And I did also like the other performances as well, including Matt Smith. I'm not really too familiar with the guy. I know that he's done. I know he's best known for Doctor Who, and I've heard he's great in that show. I've never seen Doctor Who, but he was great in this movie, and I thought he was really, having a good time. He was definitely having a good time in this. He was definitely a lot of fun to watch at times, and he just plays this really sinister guy that, he's one of those like you love to hate kind of characters, so to speak. But I do have a con of his character that I felt like they really, that I'll get into later about, that they really could have put more emphasis on. And one of the other biggest standouts I thought really was great in this was Diana Rigg. And keep in mind, I've only seen her in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and I heard that she was also in the original Avengers TV series from the 60s, and I've heard that's a good show as well. But if here, I thought, hers it being her last film, she really knocked it out of the park, and I thought she was tremendous in this. And she plays the landlord of where Thomas and Mackenzie's character stays at, and I thought she was really great. And then the other biggest praise I have to really admit too is I love the production design, especially when we get into the dream sequences. The way that Edgar Wright is able to give us the look of the 1960s London, I thought was fantastic, especially with a lot of the cars, a lot of the different posters you see, like a Thunderball, another James Bond film. And I love also the very different like colors that he vibes with the tone of the film, because there's a lot of scenes where you dive into the macabre aspect of it that I thought was pretty unique, especially when you see the color red blending in with a lot of the very grim scenes that take place. And I won't go into detail, but let's just see, those were the biggest standouts for me as well. And I got to really get a kick out of the soundtrack to this. When they play a lot of the 60s soundtrack in this, I thought it was really catchy. That's sort of another style I noticed with a lot of Edgar Wright's movies, is that he loves to play a lot of classic music in a lot of his films, and I get a kick out of it. It's almost the equivalent of how, and I'm not trying to compare, I'm just saying in a good positive way, I look at it as like it's kind of like what Tarantino does when he mixes a lot of classic rock, classic tunes in his films to make to play the scenes out. I just thought it really worked in that regard. And one of the other things I really got to enjoy is the way that the movie does, start out as pretty, the way that the story is going along, and it has a lot of good parallels that take place with Thomason's character and Anya's character. And the way that it also has this really unique twist it also has a twist that I won't get into detail, but let's just say that it did get me, but I did this is not the movie's fault. I kind of shot myself in the foot because I read up on some of the details about it that I won't get into, so that's kind of what kind of got to me, that I found where the movie was going after reading up on it. So it did kind of take a little bit of the mystery out of it for me, but for the movie itself that works and that the way it plays it out, I still thought it really worked. And it gave a whole lot of new layers to the way that it pays off in the end with it. Now, I will also say too is that the movie does also have a very unique approach with being able to go from like the direction that Wright does, where it essentially shifts from like one character is in a dream and then it like shifts into the reality part. I thought that was really great, the way the clever filmmaking in that, where it blends in from dream to reality, so to speak. It actually kind of reminded me of what we had earlier this year with *Malignant*, where things that were pretty much happening in the dream world were also happening in real life. That I thought was pretty cool, in a good way. Now, if I'm going to get into, now with that being said though, I do have to say that this movie does have some flaws, and one of the biggest things I will say the movie did kind of hold back for me was, as much as I was getting into a lot of the stuff in the dreamlike world that we get into, it did feel like we didn't spend a whole lot of time with it to really see where it was going, because I think once it actually gets into the second half, it starts to really shift away from being a lot more on the other stuff that's going on with Ellie in the real world, which is fine, but it also makes it feel like it's very hollow with the stuff that's going on in the dreams stuff, in the dream sequences, and it really feels like there's more things that they could have really added a whole lot more layers with Matt Smith's character, and get us really more into the vibe of what's really happening with this other character they bring in that's played by Terrence Stamp. Like, there's a lot of stuff that they really don't establish too much with that they really could have put a lot more emphasis on to really enhance the story. And one of the other biggest things I really found that was kind of lacking was, and just not really lacking, but one of the other things I will say that I also wasn't really interested in too much with was, they have this love interest that they bring in for Thomas and Mackenzie's character, and I felt like the character was just not interesting, and you could have cut this character completely out, and it wouldn't have really resolved anything. And I really think the only that the whole reason that he was there was just to advance the plot. And because we don't really spend a whole lot of time with because we don't really have time that we're spent with him and her throughout the film, it really feels like it's very empty and just non-existent with the way that they build things up with them together. Not to mention, there was also another thing I kind of wish that they would have put more emphasis on is, I'm not going to go into detail, but let's just say that they could have dealt more deeper into Mackenzie's backstory about about her past and everything like that. They have that with her family. I think that they really could have spent a whole lot more time digging into this, and that's probably why the film. I mean, it probably would have made the movie longer, but they could have really fleshed some things out instead of glossing over a lot of things that are just kind of more thrown in there and just not really expanded upon. But with that being said, though, I still, while the story, the main cuss of it was still going along with it, with the visually and everything that was going on visually, and the way the story went on, that was unfolding, especially when we get into the third act, is where it picked up for me. And so once everything did actually pick up with that in that regard toward the third act, and was able to have it resolved in that twist ending, did really save it for me in the end. So with that being said, I will say that I like the film, but it definitely could have been a whole lot better had we could have spent more time with other things going on. And so with that being said, I'm going to give the movie a low compelling grade on the Film Freaks meter. So for those of you who have also seen Last Night in Soho, let me know in the comments below what you thought about it. And thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, and I'll see you in my next review. I'll see you later.